Hey, you're listening to Fat and Greasy Citizens, a podcast about Shakespeare. I'm Fat.
And I'm Greasy. Every week we do a deep dive into every act of every Shakespeare play ever written, mostly while drinking.
More specifically, I'm Chuck. I'm a former English major and now a digital editor who cares a lot about Shakespeare.
And I'm Gabe. Let's do it!
In this episode, Kate visits Petruchio's weird bro house, and Lucentio gets closer to Bianca and finds a fake dad.
Yes. Man, this act is pretty fucking brutal.
I wrote, the first thing I wrote, when last we left our intrepid couple, our newly wedded couple, they just got married, and Petruchio already started his reign of terror. He actually calls it a reign later on, which I think is hilarious. But the first thing I wrote was a strong BTK killer vibe right off the bat. It's like, let's go to my cabin in the woods. It's like, that doesn't sound great.
Yeah, there's a certain level of psychopathic husband who like keeps on the down low through the wedding day, and then maybe for 3 months, and then there's another level of which like, oh no, baby,
Yeah.
You have no rights before the law. It's time to get down to it.
Yeah, and again, I keep harping on this one thing, whether or not it's a commentary on heterosexual relationships,
Yeah.
but it really is kind of like, this is in fact, I think it's Hortensio says later on, like, if this thing with Petruchio works, I've got my roadmap now of how to make this happen,
I think the window for this my first question was like, does it have sexist characters or is it inherently sexist? And I think like the plane's left on that.
Yeah,
it's inherently sexist, and so now I think the only thing left is like, does it paint such a shitty portrait of either heterosexual relationships or men overall that you could say that it's anti those things, because it's not pro lady.
No, it isn't. But what's interesting, and like this, the very first scene in Act 4, I think, is a really interesting one from the perspective of, okay, so is this a commentary or not? Because if you notice, Petruchio's house is just full of dudes.
Yeah,
he's got all these servants, and every single one of them. I don't know if Sugarsop is a man or not, but I'm going to assume that Sugarsop is. You have to get down. My cat's up there.
Because of Sugarsop, I assumed they were horses or something.
Yeah.
And so that did work for me as a joke to just be like, it's like Nathaniel, Jacques, Turner, Sugarsop. You're like, wait a minute. And then he's like, and are their breasts well coiffed? And you're like, all right, maybe these are lions? What are these? Like, nope, it's just 4 dudes.
Yeah, and I went back and counted them because the list of names that Gremio I almost said Gremio. Grumio originally says is something like 5 or 6 strong, and then later, when Petruchio comes in and asks about, whether or not, where is everybody? Like, why isn't anybody at the door? He names like 4 or 5 other people. So like,
are they not the same people?
No, they're not. I counted the individual names, and there are 11 of them. And not only are there 11 names, but then later on, obviously, if you're directing it, first servant. The first servant character could be any of the characters listed until then.
Sugarsop.
But if you if that isn't true, that first servant isn't one of the names already listed, then you could say there's a dozen dudes just hanging out in this house.
You could do so much with Sugarsop, like just the fact that there's all these interchangeable idiot men, and that these all are idiots today, are idiots throughout this act and throughout the play. Just the fact that there's one called Sugarsop could allude to just all sorts of business happening to Petruchio's house.
Yeah, and
what's your job? Your job is to be Sugarsop, boy.
And that's the beauty of it, is that he's, in theory, Sugarsop is the only one who warranted a nickname. So what did Sugarsop do? It's like Steve, Danny, Mike, and Twinkie Boy. It's like
have you seen what's it called? Hail Caesar, the Coen Brothers movie?
Yes, I have, yes.
There's this little kid that delivers a message to Eddie Mannix real really quickly, and his name's Peanut. And the only reason he knows because he rides up on a bike, and he's like, "Hey, what's up, Peanut?" It's like that. It just gives you such a window into the entire studio system that there's a kid named Peanut who delivers things. Similarly, Sugar Sop being one of the 9 men that live there. It's just like, oh, Sugar Sop. It's just your job to comb your hair and look pretty, isn't it?
And Sugar Sop is, yeah, again, like he's clearly done something to achieve that nickname, and whatever it is most likely it's horrible to be Sugar Sop, I would imagine.
Yes, no, you don't. It is your dream to arise to the level of Nathaniel and no longer have the duties of Sugar Sop.
I would rather be Gabriel or Walter.
Both of those are men of dignity. Sugar Sop, not so much.
Yeah, Sugar Sop is by far, like, and it's such a throwaway line that, like, I love that.
But you're right. It is a window into Petruchio's world. Like, this is his castle, and someone's got to be Sugar Sop, baby.
Yeah, and, and I was thinking about those guys because, like, the first thing that Petruchio does is just scream at everybody that nothing's being done right, and if you take the whole act into context, like if you look at it from take a step back, there's every chance that one of two things is a possibility, that all those guys are there and are just hanging out, and this is the first time they've ever been asked to do anything like this, or they're like a crack team of servants, and his behavior is completely offensive to them because they're really good at this normally, and it's like he's just because it's all part of his plan to make Kate see the opposite of whatever she sees. Like, maybe you play it that way, where this is like a hardcore team of servants who are really good at this, and Petruchio's behavior is completely confounding to them.
I see them as like people who have been broken in the exact same way he's trying to break Kate.
Oh, good,
just
interesting.
Like basically like the employees who aren't management in Office Space. Like, they all might have individual talents, but they also kind of don't like each other, and they are all just so broken by the culture that they live in that they just kind of like embody their roles and enjoy like blaming each other for small things, but are also like completely mired in incompetency because they have Petruchio for a boss.
It actually echoes what you were saying before about maybe you thought they were horses. Like, these are all animals that Petruchio's broken over time.
And will always be thus. That said, I like the opening half scene with Grumio and Curtis just arguing about who's going to make the fire.
Right.
And again, that reminds me of like a dysfunctional office or something, where it's like it's not a difficult thing to do, but they're just going to sit there and argue about who needs to do it. Just the rhythm of their arguments back and forth and the slapping of each other reminds me of the Three Stooges. But like, I guess I have nothing more to say other than I like this as an opening. I like the way they slap each other around. The only thing that I think is truly noteworthy about it is that, once again, like, they have some of Petruchio's like most grotesque stuff happening off screen, and so for the fact that like the horse falls on Kate, Grumio has to get it out of the water. He's screaming at her, and Grumio's telling she's praying to God to end it. It's just such a weird thing to again have off screen, and there's such this ongoing motif of her like praying to God for it to stop him beating the shit out of a minister here or there. But the fact that it so often happens off screen, I can't think of any reason for it other than it's really difficult to have a horse on screen.
Yeah,
and so
that's what I was thinking.
What we just say, what the horse fell on her, and
yeah, but that's the thing is, like, I think this scene, as much trouble as I had with those other scenes that are similar in this play, I feel like he's definitely, well, for lack of a better term, beating a dead horse. Like, he's repeating some of the gags, like between Curtis and Grumio. There's this really stupid misunderstanding in language that leads to the first like slap fest.
yeah,
Like, it's like, would you call me a beast? It's like, it's so dumb. Like, it's like, of course he didn't. Like, it doesn't, like, you'd have to be, like, the character has to be incredibly stupid to believe that. It just seems weak to me. And then, like, the dick joke that comes out about the horn, something like, It's like you're short, and he's like, well, I'm as big as your dick, or something like that, or like.
You know what I think would be interesting to see is if we get through all 40 plays, if there's a horn joke that holds up, because I feel like the horn jokes always suck.
They always stink. Yeah.
So if there's ever just like a well-landed horn joke, then that should be celebrated. Also, if there's ever a decent cuckold joke, then that should be celebrated. But I bet there will not be. Overall.
And it's not even a good, like, it's not even an insulting joke. He's basically saying, well, your dick's big and I'm as big as your dick. Like, it's like, well, how is that insulting to him? You just said it was a foot long.
Like, it's like, you're short. Well, I'm bigger than your dick.
Yeah. Like, what?
Okay, so true, but do you even... And he just slaps him. The one thing that I do think that's great that comes out of Grumio's mouth as a result of this is, do you remember in the movie Splash when the tour guide just screams "bocce balls"?
Yeah, bocce balls.
Towards the end of this, Grumio just screams "Cock's passion," which I feel like is about as good as "bocce balls." Just like, and the note in my version of it says that this means, in reference to like by the passion of Christ. I'm like, that's by no means what it means. It's to scream "Cock's passion." But that's his segue to them walking in. It's just like they're having a conversation, they're having a small-minded debate, and then he just turns his head and goes, "Bocce balls!"
That's, it's funny. Grumio has another good moment where like all the rest of the servants come in, and it's like a page of people going, "Hey, how's it going? Hey, hi," and then Grumio at the very end it says, "And thus much for greeting." It's like, it reminded me of like a Three Stooges or Marx Brothers things where it's like, hello, doctor, professor. Okay, well that's over. Like the niceties are done. Let's continue on with like there's a finality in it. Like
no, I'm going to go so much more low class than you since you're talking about Marx Brothers. There's a scene in the movie with Jim Brewer and the comedian Dave Chappelle. It's a movie just about getting high. I can't remember what it is, but there's a guy that quits his job at a fast food place. Yeah, Half-Baked.
Yeah.
Guy quits his job at a fast food place, and he's saying goodbye to both customers and the people that work there. And he goes, "Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, you're cool, fuck you." And that's what Grumio does. It's just like, it's why you suck, but it's smarter than that. Let me find the absolute.
Or it's like National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, where he's like, "Fuck you, up yours."
Yeah, Happy Hanukkah.
Kiss my ass, kiss his ass.
Yeah, but you could. This would be really fun to do. Welcome you. How now you? What you? Fellow you, and thus much for greeting.
Yeah, and thus much for greeting.
Like, but yeah, to like do everything Chevy Chase does, and then be like, all right, I've greeted you, fucking.
Yeah, I think like the more deadpan that line would be is the better. Like, oh, we've done that. So, moving on.
And so then we get to Petruchio coming in, and this is the thing that I noticed both through like when there's rhyming, when there isn't, but also in this scene, he seems to purposely deny. He seems to sing to the crowd, like the audience of the play.
Mm.
And
yeah, he's lots of
Kate
rhyming.
Like yeah, but never in addressing Kate. So he comes in, he's singing, and then he stops mid-verse. He's like, "Sit down, Kate." And then he goes back to singing, and he's either singing to the crowd, yelling at his servants, or like telling Kate to sit down. But the fact that like he'll be happy and singing and bringing magic into the world, but then as soon as he looks at Kate, he's like, "Sit down, Kate." There's something about that she has to see that like he's capable of lyricism, but in his reality, she's kind of like antithetical to music.
Yeah.
Even though like the words he says seem to be welcoming her, he right after he says "Sit down, Kate," he starts singing again and segues from that into like beating his underlings. And so like what she's getting from him and what everyone's getting from him is just like he's a monster. He puts on this sing-song happy voice until he sees someone that annoys him and just lashes out at them. And so, like, what Kate has to take from that right away is that, like, she's going to be in that role soon enough if she isn't there yet.
Yeah. And, like, there's definitely the beginning of Petruchio's... I mean, at the very least, it's gaslighting. At the very worst, it's, like, an attempt to control reality. Like a controlling the narrative. Like, and he's got a really he actually has a funny line. Like, I mean, it's supposed to be funny, I understand, but like it's just not. And like it just, for me, Petruchio is a real dirtbag. It's hard to get behind him. But he does after he throws all the meat off the entire meal off the table. He says something. I can't eat stuff like that. It makes me irritable. like after his giant freak out, he has that stuff like it makes me angry. That's some of that stuff. And
so it's completely fucked up, and that's why like it's interesting. It's so well done and structured. It's interesting if you could find a way to show it, because for him to be much that of an asshole, and then to say I can't eat this because that would make me into an asshole. It's a couple things. A, it's like clearly taking food away from her. Mm-hmm. It's also acting as if he has no responsibility for when he's being an asshole.
Right.
So it's making everyone present by not speaking up. Somehow culpable for like not speaking up when he's an asshole, like by saying like I'm not inherently an asshole, just sometimes people feed me mustard, and then I have to beat people. But to purposely frame it like around the humors or something like that lets him off the hook, makes everyone else a party to letting him off the hook, and also it prompts her to then say, you could enjoy this if you decided to. She says, the meat as well if you were so contented. And that's kind of forcing her to say, like, everything's not, or just to say what Hamlet said, like, nothing's either good or bad unless you think it's so.
Yeah.
But, like, this is actually bad. And so he's forcing her to say, like, well, it's all relative, so you could make yourself eat this if you wanted to. And by making her say that out loud, it's, like, setting her up to fail.
Yeah.
Because once she admits anything could be good or bad, you could just make it so in your head, then he's like one step closer to being able to just completely scramble her brains and say, oh, but maybe I am treating you well.
Yeah.
And
that's a great point, because he steps on the gas immediately after that. He even, like a villain in a movie, he confesses what his plan is at the end of that scene, the very first scene, He's like, this is what I'm doing. I'm breaking her. And it's funny. His last line is something like, if there's any better way to do it, I'd love to hear it. And what's great about that is that I always love to identify those lines in Shakespeare that are purposefully interactive, because, many people don't know, dear listener, many people don't know that theater in Shakespeare's time is totally different. The audience was expected to interact with the people on stage. It wasn't like a holy thing the way we see it now.
Look askance at someone if they said, "Have you tried beating her?"
Yeah. Like it was all part of the thing, and he very often wrote those interactive moments into the plays, and I think this is a really good one. I'm sure that would have gotten a response, that Petruchio directly saying, "Hey, does anybody, if anybody else knows,
Right, and what it's doing is saying, like, in the same way that he made everyone at the dinner table either speak up or be culpable with what he does next, by him turning to the crowd and be like, does anyone else know a better way to treat a woman horribly? Like, he's doing the same thing to the crowd at that point, saying, like, listen, we live in a sexist society, so does anyone else have a better idea of how it can be a sexist prick?
Yeah.
And again, like, of course, in Elizabethan times, like, no one does speak up, but it's a great way to just, like, do to the crowd what he's been doing to everyone in the room wherever he goes throughout the play so far.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty sinister. I mean, again, from a modern context, it's a very sinister moment where he's like, "Hey, if anybody else has a better idea to get a woman under your thumb, like anything you say, anything you say in return, as you say, you're either condoning what he's doing or you're falling on deaf ears." Like it's a very villainous thing to say.
No, this is if you could figure out the right way to make it clear that this is like villainy and not adorable tomfoolery, this is such a great evil seed, because almost all the time she speaks up, she's saying, please stop beating your servants, and so that's the only voice that she has, not for anything for herself, but please just stop no, you misheard him. He didn't mean that. He was trying to help me. Please stop beating him. And whenever she says it, she says, I pray you, stop doing it. And so he's making himself into this ultimate authority and just slowly breaking her down. And, like, it's both in the way he does it and the way he tosses it to the audience at the end. It's just, it's crazily messed up. The fact that he ends with that soliloquy, the fact that, I don't know if that is the origin of the phrase kill with kindness, or if it's something that he used at that point, but either way, it's one of those, if that is the origin, then that phrase should not be used anymore, because fuck.
Yeah, because it doesn't mean in this play what it's come to mean now, you know. In fact, I think it is the origin. I think I have a poster somewhere, you know, a fun teachery poster of phrases, and I think that's one of them.
What I mean is completely gaslight a woman until she goes insane.
Yeah.
That's what we mean by kill with kindness.
I killed him with kindness. He lost his job. And like obviously that's a great cliffhanger to end the scene, and then scene 2. Hortensio folds really quickly. I found,
Yeah, you realize that either you have to either like dispense with this side plot, or make it utterly clear that Bianca is in love with Lucentio. Or do something else with it, because this just opens up and Hortensio just announcing, like, I kind of respect that, like, he's doubly overwhelmed because he thinks he's confiding in Tranio, but still, like, he's just like, look at them together, and quits on it. I'm not sure why this needs to be in here unless you really need him to bring in his wife to be trained in the last act.
Yeah.
He's...
Although he does say that he's inspired by Petruchio's.
Yeah, I tell you what, the one thing on the creepy front, the only thing that stands out to me in here is that, again, like last time, like last act, a switch went on in Bianca's head, and she's like, "Oh, Kate's out of the room. We're talking crap about her. I'm game."
Yes.
She's in the room when he's like, "Oh yeah, no, there's a school about how to utterly just drive a woman insane."
That's right.
She doesn't know who she is, and it's being run by Petruchio. And she's like, "Oh, is there?"
Yeah.
not a single concern, not a single worry about her sister. She's like, "Oh, that's interesting. My sister's strapped into a chair, and they're cutting her head open, and they're just gonna pull out her Abdullah Mugada. That's awesome."
I totally didn't pick up on that. Yeah. He's like, "You bet there is." And the headmaster is Petruchio.
She's like, okay, cool.
Yeah, she was really being a shrew.
And like Bianca's point of view is like, well, I am the prettier sister, so I am down with the patriarchy. So
yeah,
go for it.
And what's interesting is like that kind of abandonment. Then it actually folds really well into that next scene. Then because I wrote down that the starving Kate of food and sleep is just fucked up. It's such a fucked up thing. The premise is fucked up.
It's got to be the most gaslighting scene of the play, where it's just like, and in part because it's not even just him, it's Grumio too. For that reason, it's really nice to see this scene almost open up with her beating him. Like, she has the strength to beat someone one last time in the play. Like, Grumio tries to give her shit, and she beats him up, and that's great to see. But it's kind of like a sad last hurrah.
Yeah, and that's the thing though, is her beating up Grumio in that moment is totally understandable. He's antagonizing her with food.
Yeah.
And of course, if you were being intentionally starved, you'd lash out. Like her only crime.
If you're being intentionally starved, and someone's like, "Oh, would you like to eat some mustard?"
Yeah.
Exactly right. To just.
Well, how about the mustard and not the meat? Like he's such an asshole.
And then there's again something evil about when Hortensio arrives and Petruchio in a side chat is like, if you love me, eat all the food so she can't eat it.
Yeah.
And that phrasing, if you love me, is like such a pure, like, again, to go back to whatever is going on with the guys that live at Petruchio's place, but like the whole, like, to another guy who just showed up to be taught how to be an asshole, to be like, if you love me, torture my wife.
Yeah. And I actually I wrote that down somewhere. I wrote that down somewhere where it's interesting because I think Shakespeare is getting at something that is actually, I mean, he gets a lot of credit for being very a psychological writer in a lot of ways, but that idea of the mistreatment of women being something that is calculated and taught, and is passed on from one man to another is a really, like, it's a strong plot point in this entire play. It happens a couple times where another man is like, maybe this is the way to do it, like, and it's like an infection,
That would be, so that's a really interesting thing to get across. I wonder, like, how you could do that effectively in order to not just say, like, you're supposed to get joy in watching these horrible people, but actually watch Petruchio turn Hortensio into, like, a boring schmuck into, like, an honest-to-God piece of shit.
Yeah.
And partly it's just, like, however they act after he tells them to eat it and whatnot, but
yeah,
that's a really good point. Like, you're not going to get a happy ending out of this, but you could get, like, a blueprint for a basically decent family that allows Petruchio into it, or even like a basically decent city.
Yeah.
And Petruchio just comes into it and turns every man into a piece of shit. And
yeah.
Society is such that, like, there are no repercussions for that. Nothing really changes. Like, the world can be good for men, or it can be bad for men. It can be good for women or bad for women. But the rest of the society really doesn't care at all. They have no skin in the game. And so, if you come in and you teach every man to treat his wife like crap, none of the elites are going to say, "Whoa, let's hold up, let's do anything different." Like, it's
right.
abundantly clear that anyone can come up and turn everyone else into a bully within the systems as they work. And you're right. That's a consistent thing where it happens, but also, like, it's frictionless. Like, it's not a great corruption of the soul. It's like, why don't you do this? And someone's like, okay.
Oh yeah,
he barely thinks about it. Girls?
Yeah.
Like,
it's funny because, like, I think a lot about, I mean, flash forward to the present and how, Shakespeare is profound in a lot of ways from a present day context. Like, this idea of, like, the boys' club, you hear about that a lot, and it's really true. Like, even in the job I just had, the women would confide in me that this is a real boys' club. And this is education.
Yeah.
We're not talking about the CEO of the Fortune 500 company. Like, this is a school. And I think that there's something in that, like Shakespeare pointing out that this kind of boys' club, there is an assumption, and I've noticed this with men in my life, where it's like there's an assumption like, well, you're a guy and I'm a guy, and there's some things that we agree on, right? Wink, wink, wink. And it's like there's that assumption, and I think that assumption of masculinity, dominant masculinity, is definitely in this play, and Petruchio is obviously the wellspring of it. But, like,
no, so one of the things that I think while reading this is that, like, I don't think, like I said, I don't think the play could ever be confused with something that's friendly towards women, but I do think it might have masculinity nailed.
Oh yeah,
along the lines of, like, what you just said. Like, I remember and had a kid right before I had a kid, and he told me that the way to get out of doing diapers is the first time your wife asks if you're going to do diapers is to look her in the eye and say, "Honey, you married a man," and then just walk out. And I was like, "The hell are you?" All right, man. Good luck with your marriage. I'm not.
No
thanks. But, like,
for the listener, I just winced when John said that.
But he said that some guy told that to him, and so it is exactly like from one guy to another, just being like, "Oh, here's what you got to do," and, like, that is a fundamental part of how this kind of toxicity spreads.
Yeah,
it's like, oh god, it's hard to. Me and my wife are both sleep deprived right now. How are we supposed to get through this? And it's like, well, here's what you do.
Did I already bring up that thing I saw on Twitter?
No.
About the woman who it was a story that was retweeted from the source. This young woman who was dating a guy, and the guy, she said everything was going great, and the guy was kept telling her that she stunk, that she smelled bad. And
you told me.
Oh yeah, but it's similar to that, right? And the obviously the punchline of the story is his father did that to his mother, and so he learned that that's the behavior that will keep a woman in line, quote unquote. Right? That if you completely demoralize her and take away her sense of individuality, that her happiness is contingent on the man's happiness, which I think is something that Petruchio is doing tenfold, right? He's basically saying that you cannot have the very things that will keep you alive unless it's through me. Unless I say it's okay for you to do that. And I think that that's at the base of the whole play. That's at the base of, the kind of the toxicity that we're talking about. Like that's it. It's like it's a learned thing. I would love to see a play about Petruchio's dad. I would imagine he's a giant pile of shit too.
Guys. I think like so if we hit upon like the last act would be the one to show is somehow with Petruchio as Peter Griffin and Meg as Kate.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like the way to make this one castable is to make it about the toxicity of like bros broing out, because one of the things that I think is most horrifying about this is the way that Kate just recedes. Like she has no lines actually. She gets to beat Grumio again, but that's about all that she has throughout the act. And so first of all, Petruchio, like he starts rhyming his way through around like line
he's all
50.
of a sudden he's starting to spit hot fire. he's like a wannabe
silken
rapper.
Coats, caps and rings, ruffs and cuffs and farthings and things. Like just being an absolute asshole, and she has less and less to say. And she's in scene 3. She's again reduced to speaking up in defense of servants or hired hands. But as they keep like bringing in tailors and whatnot, and Petruchio argues with Grumio, who argues with the tailor.
Yeah,
she just has no role whatsoever, and so you could almost like you could have the lighting focus on her as they just argue their bullshit. You could have the lighting remove her from the scene as they argue their bullshit. But it's clear that just like they're just going off and doing their stupid man debating about if this shirt was tailored correctly or whatnot. But
you just have James Brown swell in the background. It's a man's world.
Yeah, it's about isolating her, and there's that wonderful line where Grumio, like they're debating back and forth, and Grumio's just like, there it is, error in the bill, in the bill.
Yep.
And it's a great little point in the argument, but it also just like sums up the stupidity of their argument. Like there's supposed to be stakes in a play, and like the most clarifying line is like, there it is, error in the bill. It's let's have 3 guys argue about a bill on stage for 15 minutes. Like the only point of it is to just show how isolated she is, and that she doesn't in this world have any authority to actually like say what she's going to wear, say what it should look like, argue with the tailor or anything. So these 3 idiots are just going to more loudly argue about it while she just sits in the corner and kind of loses her voice.
Yeah, and it not only is it isolating in terms of just like the bullshit, who gives a shit conversation, but that idea that he's trying to suggest to her through these scenes, and he's totally like duck season, rabbit seasoning the whole situation. Until she gets to the point where it's almost like he's saying, look, like through his actions, and what he's saying is like, I control time, I control reality, I control space, and I also control your clothing.
No, that's exactly what he says to her. Look what I speak or do or think to do. It's like, listen to what I say, listen to what I'm doing, and try and guess what I think. And then maybe you have a chance of understanding reality. But
try to guess what I think is exactly what it is. And she's never right,
Right.
And what a better way to to completely take somebody off of their foundation, is to just have them doubt every thought that's in their head. Like, well, this guy is, because he's such a insistent son of a bitch, that it's like, this cap sucks, and she's like, well, it's the fashion of the time. I love this cap. It's like, nope, it sucks.
He's like, well, I didn't tell the tailor to make it like a fucking moron. Does it say make it like a fucking moron? And I think one of the things that's clear is that, like, before she was married, she was an independent woman who, like, wouldn't take this shit from anyone.
Right.
And so the fact that she slaps Grumio around but doesn't do anything to him also speaks to the fact that, like, she has no legal authority.
Right.
Like, he can do whatever he wants, and she can't backtalk. Like, she literally has to wait and see what he's going to do, what he's going to say, and what his thoughts are. Because the best she has going for her at this point is to maybe beat his servants up sometimes the way he does. But she has no rights besides that. And if she did have either legal rights or an assumption that norms would back her, then I think she might fight back. But I think she kind of knows that, like, she's caught at this point. Like,
yeah.
He can do whatever he wants.
I think it's a really good point that, I mean, she knows what the social contract is, like she knows what marriage means in the context of the time that this is written, and so her only avenue to let off some steam is to beat the shit out of the guy under him, because she's got nothing else.
Yeah, it's not good.
No, it isn't.
Not good, Bob.
And then it leads to in scene 4 the most convoluted plot in dramatic history. With again, like I love a good what's the term I'm looking for, the genre, when people dress as other people and masquerade as
especially
false identity, like a false identity play. But this gets so out of control when I don't think, and this is, maybe you understand it, because I don't understand the fake father routine. I don't get it. I know that was hinted at in the beginning of the play. They're like, you have to find somebody to be my fake father.
Well, that's what they did. They said we have to do this, but this is the same guy who said, like, well, I killed a guy, that's why I'm doing this. So it doesn't seem necessary. The fact that I think I just invented that he was a drunk because him being a, quote, pedant doesn't tell me anything. Like, just like, he's a schmuck who thinks he's smart, so he's going to dress up and act smart. It's bizarre and useless. The only thing that jumps out to me from this scene, besides the overall weirdness of it, is that Baptista gives his, quote, consent to Bianca's marriage. I think that's the only time that word is used in the play. And the fact that Tranio at, like, line 61 says, like, well, we're moving so fast, there won't be time for a feast for the wedding. And he says that while we know Kate is just, like, stuck in a dungeon and hasn't been able to eat for 3 days. And so it just makes it seem all the more toxic that it's just like,
yeah,
ugh, what a sacrifice that we won't get a proper feast. Yes, I know your other daughter was dragged off by a psychopath who's starving her right now for no apparent reason and slapped a priest. But hey, we won't get a feast, so that sucks. But generally agreed. And, like, Lucentio also, like, since Hortensio and Gremio are so easily overcome, like, he doesn't seem, you're not that happy for him. Like, he defeated 2 uninteresting challengers for Bianca's heart, but Bianca's not that interesting. They weren't that challenging. I suppose you're happy for Lucentio, but it more seems like one frat guy ending up with one sorority girl, where it's just like, okay, well, yeah, no, they're kind of matched. Like,
yeah,
they both like Dave Matthews Band, so I'm happy for them. Like, I'm going to the wedding, but in no way does this coupling give me faith in humanity. Like, no. They're a good fit. Like, cool.
Yeah, and
Davey
it's
and Donnie,
like,
it's fine.
And a lot of, it's funny because it does remind me again of, like, Marx Brothers stuff, where the young lovers really don't come up against any real challenges. They kind of meet each other and then stuff happens around them, you know.
And I think that could be good to just be like the young lovers, or same with, like, Abbott Costello or anything else. You're like, the young lovers are not supposed to be that interesting. Like the people.
No, they're not the focus. No, they're really
Yeah.
not the focus.
They're gonna give us like a couple beats for our show, but like, you're really focused on the weird people who slap each other, not the young lovers. And so, like, get through this stuff as quickly as possible, and probably like cut the hijinks. Like, just have them fall in love.
Yeah, and
Get
that
ready for a wedding at the end.
and that's what I think almost subverts it in a way, because normally, well, not normally, but like 9 times out of 10, the young lovers are supposed to be the couple that you latch onto as, well, there's a good couple, but there's a whole bunch of like scheming and plotting underneath this. Like Lucentio didn't come by it by honest means. It's not a it's they fell in love, yes, and that was an honest thing, but there's a lot of bullshit and a lot of manipulation that got to that point. So it's like, even Lucentio, well, we talked about Lucentio's not a great guy either.
Yeah, they seem like two people. I'm glad they're in love, but very comfortable in their privilege and not going to do anything about it. Like, literally, if her sister gets dragged off into some hellhole of a marriage, but that clears the way for her, she's fine with it. Hortensio, not a great guy. Not great to his servants. Tells people he's murdering folks. Has some guy impersonate his dad just because his dad, I think, like, might take some time to get into town or something. He wants to get married right away. Like, there's no good reason to.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to
do
me.
this to his dad.
No,
and it's not wholly surprising that his dad in the next act ends up like being put out by someone impersonating him in town and vouching for his money. Like, that could come up. That's not insane.
Yeah. And Vicentio, by the way, is like, for some reason, his entrance reminded me of almost every 80s sitcom of these elaborate hoaxes, and then the real person shows up.
What?
And like nobody
That's
knows
my
what
real-
to do.
No, it's directly out of Friends or Three's Company, where it's just like, I know you're saying you're my dad, but that's my real dad.
Yeah, like
What?
it's like, then you realize like the wonderful history of comedy and how it's all the same. Like these little conventions have always been in there. Like the jig is up, fellas.
Yeah. Okay, and so then just this last scene of just her, something about making someone doubt the difference between the sun and the moon is just...
It's particularly insulting. Yeah, it really is.
It's just horrifying. It's just... it reminds me of the end of 1984, where they make two people who've fallen in love like confess that they would happily sacrifice the other rather than be killed themselves, and then their love is truly broken for each other. Then, like, you can put them next to each other on a park bench, they won't even feel love for each other because they've realized, oh yeah, no, if I had to, I would sacrifice my love so that I didn't have to experience pain.
Yeah.
And this just seems similar, and just like, nope, that's the moon. No, it isn't. 12 o'clock? No, it's 7 o'clock. What? No.
Yeah. Just saying things like, it's whatever hour I say it is so incredibly fucked up. I said, like, I wrote down in my notes, like, he's controlling space and reality and time. It's like he's got the infinity gauntlet of bullshit.
Yeah, no.
like he's like the Thanos of Shakespeare, where it's like, it is what I say it is. I control reality, But also the Vicentio moment where Kate is forced to address him as a woman is funny. But there's so much cruelty and evil to get to that part in the play that it's like, I don't even want to laugh at it anymore. Like, she's being coerced to agree with whatever Petruchio says. And it's like, call this guy a woman. Isn't this the most beautiful woman you've ever seen? And she's forced to be like, yes. And then he's like, nope, you're wrong. It's not a woman. It's a man. Like, it's so. It's just so evil and cruel,
It's, and again, like, I think you nailed it when you said, like, it's about either heterosexual relationships or men being awful. Because if he had beat her, then it'd be one thing. But it's just like, nope, that's fellas. Anytime you want to, you can do this to your wife. Like, this is none of the things Petruchio is doing here are illegal. Like, lying about your identity to get married to a woman, that's probably illegal. But everything Petruchio is doing, that's probably acceptable to everyone in the crowd. And so, like, I'm just going to let you understand that this is the power that you have in society right now. This is how fucked up we are right now. That if you want to make her perceive these things, or just go crazy, then you can.
That's a really good point. Like even today, you can argue like, well, I never hit her, but the psychological control, like, that's hard to prove, and especially when you're doing it, you're manipulating someone to the point where they're making choices based on what you say. Like it's the perfect crime for Petruchio. Well, look what a fool she is. Now.
Well, look what a fool she is, and look what everyone used to say about her. So
right,
and I think you could almost put that into the front of the play, that like that's why he sees her as so perfect. Like, a rich woman who no one likes is just like, oh, so no one will believe her? That's perfect.
Yeah.
Like, that's my mark. Like, a rich woman who someone will believe, that's not what I want. What I want is someone who no one will believe.
Yeah, or care. And I think maybe that's even the greater point, right? Is like, not only won't they believe her saying like, oh, he's manipulating me, but they wouldn't give a shit. Like, it's well established. I think even like, not only if like in either the last scene or this scene, there are a few other comments about how Kate is a shrew. There's actually a really great line from one of from Curtis, I think, where he says, sounds like he's more of a shrew than she is.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, again, it's that thing. It's like, yes, this was written in a certain time, and yes, it couldn't possibly be as much of a social commentary as, like, because it's so rooted in the sort of sexist time that it was written in. But lines like that are just too good to skip over, where you have a servant character going like, sounds like he's the asshole here. Like, it's too good to not at least acknowledge, that Shakespeare was working on maybe a different level.
I think
sometimes.
And I think I think he doesn't have to be. He could be too sexist to care about what happens to Kate or anyone else, but still have as his focus assholery. Like, you don't have to be right about who deserves rights to understand what a bully is and how to understand them and whatnot.
Well, this could easily be a love letter to bullies too. Like,
I think that's the traditional way to put this play on. It's just like, oh, he's brilliant. Look how he does this. But I don't know. Just again, I love what you said about how he's like a virus that passes from guy to guy. Like,
yeah, he really is.
If you could show these people, like, if Hortensio, in good faith, tried to woo Bianca and felt scorned, and then falls in for this bullshit, then like that could be, but you could see him like turn into a cruel person as part of this. Then like I feel like that could be instructive, and just very sad to watch about how like, oh, when you have a system that gives men this power, then they're actually at the mercy of someone who tries to come up and turn them into someone cruel, because being cruel will save them from heartache. Being cruel will save them from laughter from other cruel men. Like, it's actually, there's a lot of cowards out there, and this is a choice a lot of cowards will make.
Yeah. And it's funny because like when you think about that, like, this is the plan, this is the foundation of a system that you could pass on to your sons, and but you think, my question about that kind of behavior in general is always, why do you want to be in charge so bad? Like, why do you have to control everything? Who cares whether or not somebody's making all the decisions and so I don't understand that impulse to want to be the leader all the time. It just doesn't compute with me, and and I think that's one of the reasons why like Petruchio is such a pile of garbage in my eyes.
Well, I think so. So he's Satan. He's a dumpster pile of evil. But I think every guy that takes his cue does it from a place of weakness.
Oh,
and
yeah,
so,
100%.
So if you're afraid of intimacy, if you're afraid of the give and take of a relationship, like this is an alternative. Like bullying is an alternative to doing the work overall. And every human being is at some level afraid of intimacy, afraid of doing the work. It'd be a lot easier to not have to negotiate or work out everything with your significant other. And so guys like this just kind of pounce. It's not rational, but
there's a certain laziness to it,
there's a huge amount of laziness.
I just don't want to. I don't want to have to negotiate everything.
Like it didn't have to be this way back in the day, man. Like
you could do whatever you want. It's like that. Remember that? Do you remember the comedian Robin Harris, Baby's Kids fame?
Yeah.
He had an extended bit about marrying an ugly woman, and it actually reminds me of this play a lot because his whole point is that if you married an ugly woman, and by the way, Robin Harris was not a good looking guy.
No, he was not. His cartoon looked a lot like him.
He looked, like,
You're like,
bug
wow,
eyes. Yeah,
Bebe's Kids. I remember when I was a kid, and all I knew was Bebe's Kids. And then I saw the actor, and I was like, well, he looks like the dad of Baby's Kids.
And he very much is. But like, his whole point was you can manipulate. Like, you can basically say whatever to the ugly woman because she's just happy to have you. And I think the bit ended with something like. I'm going to the moon, and the wife character going, what? And he's like, I said, bitch, I'm going to the moon, and she's like, well, you just be careful now, like this idea of saying these outlandish things, and because you have so much control, you do whatever you want. I'm going to the moon. What are you going to do about it? Like that. And it actually reminded me of that scene of it's the moon. No, it's the sun. It's the moon.
It's interesting that like shrewishness. In this is used almost the way you would use ugliness in like 80s culture.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Robin Harris or teen movies or whatnot. I'm not going to act like I know what dating culture is like now, but like it's the same thing. Like she has no options, so you can control reality. So go ahead and do that.
Yeah, the control of it gets darker and darker, this play, as we read it. This, by far, I think, was the darkest. This was the nadir, in a lot of ways. Well,
that's the thing, and this has to lead into... So she's gone around the bend so far that she's humiliating this old man, saying, hello, fair lady, how are you doing? And so she's even lost a part of herself that, like, will treat a nice old man on the road with any respect. And then I feel like the next time we see her, she's just a zombie. And so like this is functionally the end of her character. Like this act drains her life out of her.
Yeah.
She's sad at the beginning of the act, but she's trying. She still has the energy to beat Grumio by the middle of the act. By the end, she's just totally been erased.
Yeah. And literally doing whatever. Like going along with the reality that Petruchio is creating, So
we'll know this with a closer reading next week, but of Act 5. But I feel like maybe the spine of the play really is about like the multiplication that Petruchio allows, because in Act 3 we don't just get her converted, we get her, this random widow, and Bianca converted, and just this unholy virus that goes through every single man. To just give in to this scumbag, it reminds you of like the presidency right now, where like he came in and people were just like, oh well, there's systems that will stop him. Just like, but what if he's too sleazy for those systems? Well, then people will stand up. What if he's too sleazy for those people?
Yeah, It
well,
it
people
doesn't
will
work.
stand up.
Yeah.
What if? So how? What is their power? Well, they apply shame to it. Okay, but what if he's incapable of shame?
What if he's shameless? Yeah,
But
exactly.
there's systems that are supposed to enforce shame with shame.
Yeah.
But if at the end of the day he doesn't care about shame, what power do you have? There's got to be some power, right? Like do they all revolve around shame? Do they all revolve around him giving a damn? Well, then maybe not.
Yeah, it's not going to hold water. You can't shame the shameless. And that Petruchio is a really good example of that. You could easily, if you wanted to do a political parody of this play, you could easily have a Trump-style Petruchio.
But and that's what's so good is that you could do Trump, you could do Peter Griffin. Like there's so many characters throughout culture that you could easily go with. And then the fact that, again, not to jump ahead, but in the last act, like it is just the three of them, or the four of them, or the five of them just sitting around placing bets on what their girls will do. Like it is just, he is just eating all, like he eats her soul here, and then he just sets out to eat other souls. Like it's.
This is a comedy, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes. Like it shouldn't be called
Shakespeare's
it
first
shouldn't be called
tragedy.
The Taming of the Shrew, or it should be about the fact that like Kate actually was like the last person on the battlefield of society, and then
Yeah.
if she falls, then
Ooh, that's a really
everyone
good
falls
idea
alongside
too.
her. Like
I would love to see something like that where Kate. Well, we talked about maybe isolating Kate in terms of maybe dress or something, like putting her in a different
yeah.
time period, and she is the last.
Yeah, if you put her with like a modern sensibility and drop her into the Elizabethan age, and then she just show her just being bulldozed by society, and then like I don't know why you want to watch this thing, but it makes its point.
Yeah,
It's not a fun 2 hours.
I don't know how it's like. I don't know how you come out of Act 4 and still call it a comedy. I really don't. Like it's hard,
It's like if Idiocracy just ended up with Luke Wilson, like watching TV and masturbating. Like,
Yeah.
If there is no act where the protagonist changes anything, like yes, that would make sense that Luke Wilson has no effect. Every movie or play would make sense if the protagonist had no effect, and society just ground them underneath their boot. But that's not usually what happens. But that's.
Sleep well if you can.
Except for horror movies.
That's like this is more and more. Taming the Shrew is more and more like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where the ending is not great. Like it's not over.
Winging around his chainsaw.
Yeah, just a screaming lunatic in the night, and he's gonna attack somebody again. Like that family's not going away.
There's nothing that can stop him. He's out there.
Yeah, that's what this play is. It's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre of Shakespearean times.
Yeah, it's like if in Get Out, it ended with him getting his head sawed open. Yeah, you need to. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out next week because this is going pear-shaped.
In the exciting conclusion of this horrifying play.
What again would be good is to just have Christopher Sly just in louder and louder fashion just say, "What the fuck, asshole!
If that in fact,
Fucking assholes! That's your daughter! That's your daughter! You fucking animal!" And like have all the people who are supposed to be his, like he's a low class drunk, and have all the people who are like convincing him he's gone crazy just be like, what? This is how high class people react to each other. And just like, you fucking piece of shit. I'm a drunk bastard, but you tell you what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't treat a woman that way. I wouldn't treat my wife that way. I wouldn't treat my daughter that way.
I would love to
die.
see that. I would love to see a production where Sly just turns on the cast and audience and just, you think this is funny?
Like Petruchio's like, oh, you got a better idea, and someone suggests something. And Christopher Sly is just like, you're a fucking piece of shit. What's your name? I want everyone to know your name. What's up, Christopher Sly? What's your fucking name? Go call your mom tonight. Tell her you said this.
And the lights up are for intermission. And no, I'm following you. Where you going? The lobby?
Christopher Sly is just following people to the bathroom.
No, don't get popcorn.
What makes you think that's acceptable? Who taught you? Did your dad teach you this was acceptable? Did you have seriously? What's the matter with you? Just Christopher Sly just bullying. And at the end, the guy cries. They hug it out. Christopher Sly gets back on stage. Screams at the characters when someone else cheers. He goes and has to talk to them until they hug it out. Like Christopher Sly is just the stand-up guy.
Yeah.
Like he's the antithesis of Petruchio. Like he's the good guy who's just like, I know it's tough, man, but you gotta do the work. That's what his message is to everyone. And he's like, and sometimes you gotta get so drunk that you get kicked out of a bar and the barmaid screams at you. But that's better than being Petruchio. And that's all I got for you, man. I'm not saying it's easy. Christopher Sly, this is a PSA. Fuck that guy.
The more you know. The more you know.
Fat and Greasy Citizens, presented by the players Chuck and Gabe. On next week's episode, Taming of the Shrew, Act 5. Theme song, A Robust Crew by Darren Curtis.